I never thought I would fear my own son. But the day Daniel Sullivan walked back into my house after years of silence, something in his eyes made my blood run cold. He didn't hug me. He didn't even smile. Instead, he stood in my living room like a stranger and told me that the house I built my entire life in was no longer mine. He said he had proof, legal documents, a transfer I never signed, and when I asked him to show me, he simply said, "You'll understand soon enough." That was the moment I realized. My son hadn't come home. He had come for something. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, please take a second to like this video. Subscribe if you want more true emotional stories like this. And I'd really love to hear from you. What would you do if your own child tried to take everything from you? Also, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now in your country. After Daniel left that day, I couldn't move for a long time. The house felt different, like the walls themselves had overheard something terrible. I kept sitting in my old armchair in the living room, staring at the front door he had walked through so casually, as if he had every right to erase me from my own life. Daniel Sullivan, my only child. I whispered his name out loud, hoping it would somehow bring back the boy I raised, the one who used to run into this house shouting "Mom" before even dropping his backpack. But the silence that followed only reminded me of what had changed. Michael, my late husband, always said that grief doesn't just take people away, it rewrites the ones who stay behind. At the time, I thought he meant me. I never imagined it would rewrite Daniel instead. It had been almost 3 years since Michael passed away from a sudden heart attack. 3 years of learning how to live in a house that still carried his presence in every corner. His coffee mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet. His old reading glasses were still on the nightstand. I never had the heart to move them, and maybe that was my mistake. Maybe holding on to the past made me blind to what was happening in the present. Because Daniel, he had changed long before he walked back through my door. At first it was subtle. After Michael's funeral, Daniel called less often, short conversations, excuses about work in Chicago. He was always busy. I told myself that was normal. Grief pushes people away in different directions. But then months turned into a year, and a year turned into silence, until suddenly, out of nowhere, he came back. And now he wasn't just distant. He was cold. That night after he left, I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face again. Not the face of my son, but a version of him I didn't recognize. His eyes weren't angry. They were calculated. Like he had already decided something about me, something final. The next morning I decided to call him. It rang 4 times before he picked up. "Mom?" He said, his voice flat. Not warm, not rushed. Just neutral. "Daniel," I said carefully, sitting at the kitchen table. "What was that yesterday?" "What do you mean the house isn't mine anymore?" A pause. Then he exhaled slowly, like I was the one being difficult. "I told you," he said. "It's handled. There's paperwork." "What paperwork?" My voice tightened. "I never signed anything. Your father never." "Mom," he interrupted, sharper now. "It's already done. I'll come by later. We'll talk." And then he hung up. Just like that, I sat there staring at my phone, my heart beating faster than it should have been. Something about the way he said "it's handled" made my stomach twist. That wasn't my son speaking. That sounded like someone repeating words he had been told. That thought stayed with me all day. By afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the file cabinet where Michael kept all our important documents. Insurance papers, tax records, property deeds, everything was supposed to be there. But when I opened the folder labeled "House," something felt off immediately. There were fewer papers than I remembered. I pulled everything out and laid it across the dining table. My hands were shaking now, not from age, but from realization. One document was missing. The original deed. I checked again and again, flipping through pages like somehow it would reappear if I looked hard enough. But it was gone. That's when I felt it, the first real crack in my certainty. Someone had been here. Someone had gone through our most important files and taken what mattered most. I sat down heavily, my mind racing through possibilities I didn't want to believe. Burglary. No signs of forced entry. Misplacement impossible. I was careful with these documents, which meant only one thing I didn't want to accept. This wasn't random. This was targeted. My phone rang again. Daniel. I hesitated before answering. Mom, he said immediately. Don't touch anything in the house. My breath caught. What does that mean? I'm serious. He said, his voice lower now. Just leave everything as it is. I'll explain later. Daniel, what is going on? Someone took documents from this house. Silence. Then too quickly. You're imagining things. That sentence hit harder than anything else, because it wasn't just denial, it was dismissal, like I was fragile, like I couldn't trust my own reality. Before I could respond, he added something else. I'll send someone to help you prepare. Prepare for what? But the line was already dead again. I stood there in my kitchen holding the phone, feeling something unfamiliar creeping into my chest. Fear. Not fear of strangers. Fear of my own son. That evening I tried to distract myself by cleaning the living room, but every sound in the house felt louder than usual. The ticking clock, the floorboards creaking, even the refrigerator humming felt intrusive. And then I heard it. A car outside. I looked through the window. Daniel. But he wasn't alone. A man stepped out of the passenger seat. Tall, expensive suit, calm posture. The kind of man who didn't belong in a suburban driveway. Daniel shook his hand before they both looked at my house, and in that moment I understood something deeply unsettling. This wasn't a visit. This was a plan already in motion. I stepped back from the window just as they walked toward the front door, and I realized whatever Daniel had come for wasn't something he decided on his own. Someone else was guiding him, and I was about to find out who. I opened the door before they could knock. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fear of appearing weak in my own home. But when I saw Daniel standing there beside that man in the suit, I immediately knew this was no casual visit. Mom, Daniel said, his tone controlled, almost rehearsed. This is Victor Harlan. He's helping me sort out the property situation. The moment I heard that name, something inside me tightened. Victor Harlan. The stranger extended his hand with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Sullivan, I understand this is a difficult situation, but I assure you everything is being handled legally and professionally. Legally. That word echoed in my head like an accusation. I didn't take his hand. I don't know you, I said firmly, and I don't know what my son has told you, but there is no property situation to handle. This is my home. Victor didn't react. He simply nodded as if he had expected resistance. Daniel, however, shifted uncomfortably, just for a second. A flicker. Something human. But it disappeared quickly. That's what we need to discuss, Daniel said. Inside. I should have said no. I should have closed the door right there. But instead I stepped aside. Because he was my son. And somewhere deep down I still believed I could reach him. They walked into the living room. Victor looked around slowly, taking in everything like an inspector. Not like a guest, not like a lawyer representing fairness, more like someone evaluating value. My stomach tightened. Daniel stood near the fireplace, avoiding eye contact. Victor pulled a thin folder from his briefcase and placed it on my coffee table. I assume you are familiar with property transfer documents signed by your late husband, Michael Sullivan, he said calmly. My heart skipped. Absolutely not, I replied immediately. Michael would never transfer this house without telling me. And I never signed anything either. Victor opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents. Property deeds, signatures, dates. And there it was. Michael's signature. Or something that looked exactly like it. My breath caught. I leaned closer, my hands gripping the edge of the table. This is fake, I said instantly. This is not his handwriting. Victor's expression remained calm. Too calm. Handwriting analysis confirms authenticity, he said. That's impossible, I snapped. Who did that analysis? A certified expert, he replied smoothly. I turned toward Daniel. Daniel, I said, my voice breaking slightly now. You know your father would never do this. You know me. You grew up in this house. He finally looked at me. But his eyes, they were different. Not angry. Not emotional. Detached. Like he had already accepted a version of reality I was not part of. Mom, he said quietly. I didn't want this to be like this. Something in that sentence hurt more than anything Victor had said. You didn't want what I asked, to steal my home. Victor stepped in immediately. Mrs. Sullivan, no one is stealing anything. This transfer was made voluntarily by your husband before his passing. That's a lie, I said sharply. Michael would never. Then why is his signature here? Victor interrupted. Silence. That question hung in the air like a trap. Because I didn't have an answer. I looked at the documents again, my mind racing. The signature was close. Too close. But something about it felt slightly off. The pressure of the pen, the spacing, but to anyone else it would look real. Victor watched me carefully like he was waiting for me to break. Daniel finally spoke again. Mom, I'm not trying to hurt you, he said, but the house legally belongs to me now. I just need you to accept that. My chest tightened. You need me to accept it, I repeated. Since when do you decide what I accept in my own life? His jaw tightened slightly, and then he said something I will never forget. I'm not the one deciding. A cold silence fell over the room. Even Victor glanced at him briefly. What does that mean? I asked slowly. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Victor. Just for a second. A silent exchange. And in that moment, everything shifted. Because I realized something terrifying. Daniel wasn't in control of this situation. He was following it. Victor closed the folder gently. We don't need to make this more complicated than it already is. Mrs. Sullivan, we recommend you cooperate. It will make the transition easier. Transition, I repeated. This is my home. Victor smiled faintly. That depends on documentation. I felt my hands begin to shake. This is illegal, I said firmly. You can't just walk into someone's life and rewrite ownership because of a piece of paper. Victor's smile faded slightly. Everything we are doing is within legal boundaries, he said. Then he added almost casually, if you resist, it will only cause unnecessary stress for your son. That sentence hit differently. I looked at Daniel immediately. His face tightened. There it was again, that flicker of discomfort, like Victor knew exactly where to press. I suddenly understood something much darker. Victor wasn't just a lawyer. He was a handler, a manipulator, and Daniel was under his influence. But why? Why would my son let this happen? Victor closed his briefcase. We will return in a few days. I suggest you review the documents carefully. He turned toward the door. Daniel followed him. But before leaving, Daniel paused. He looked at me, and for a second I saw him again. Not the cold version. The boy I raised, conflicted, afraid, lost. Mom, he started. But Victor's voice cut in sharply from outside. Daniel, let's go. The moment broke instantly. Daniel's expression hardened again. He nodded slightly and walked out. The door closed behind them, and the house became silent again. But this silence was different. It wasn't peace. It was a warning. I walked slowly to the window and watched as they got into Victor's car. Before leaving, Victor glanced up at my house and smiled, not warmly, not politely, but like someone who had already won. And as the car drove away, I finally understood the real danger wasn't just losing my home. It was that my son had already started believing the lie. And I had no idea how deep that lie went. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victor Harlan smile. Not the kind of smile that comforts you, but the kind that lingers after the person has already left the room, like a threat that doesn't need words anymore. And Daniel, my son's face haunted me even more. Because for a brief moment before he left, I had seen something real behind his eyes, something conflicted, something almost desperate, but it was gone too quickly, replaced by obedience. That word kept repeating in my mind, obedience. Not love, not loyalty, obedience. At sunrise, I made a decision I didn't want to make. I was going to Robert Hayes, Michael's old lawyer. If anyone still had a record of what happened to our house, it would be him. The office was small, tucked between a dry cleaner and a pharmacy downtown. I hadn't been there in years. The moment I walked in, the smell of old paper and coffee hit me like a memory I didn't ask for. Angela Sullivan, the receptionist, asked, surprised. Yes, I said quickly. I need to see Robert Hayes. It's urgent. She hesitated, then disappeared into the back. A few minutes later, Robert came out. He looked older, tired, but his eyes were still sharp. Angela, he said gently. I'm sorry about Michael. It's been too long. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important, I replied. His expression shifted immediately. Come into my office. I followed him inside and sat down, my hands trembling slightly but trying not to show it. I need you to check something for me, I said. Our house, the property records. Something is wrong. Robert exhaled slowly, like he already feared what I was about to say. What kind of wrong? I told him everything. Daniel, Victor Harlan, the documents, the claim that Michael transferred the house, the signature. As I spoke, Robert's expression grew more serious with every sentence. When I finished, he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood up and walked to a filing cabinet behind his desk. I was afraid this might happen, he finally said. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? He pulled out a thick folder and placed it in front of me. This, he said quietly, is the original property file. My hands froze before opening it. Inside were copies of everything I had seen before, but more importantly, there were timestamps, legal notes, and internal records. And something else. A flagged entry. Red stamped. Unauthorized access detected. My breath caught. This file was accessed 2 months after Michael's death, Robert said, by someone who did not have legal authorization. I looked up immediately. Who? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. Victor Harlan, he said. The room felt suddenly colder. That's impossible, I said quickly. He wasn't involved with us. We never even heard that name before Daniel showed up with him. Robert leaned forward. That's the problem, he said. Victor Harlan doesn't appear in any official record tied to your family. No court filings, no bar association record in this state. Nothing consistent. My heart started beating faster. Then how is he representing my son? I asked. Robert's expression darkened. That's what worries me, he said. Because whoever he is, he didn't just appear. He inserted himself into a system that already had gaps. I felt my hands go cold. What gaps? Robert opened the folder further and pointed at a page. There are inconsistencies in Michael Sullivan's estate records, he said. Small ones, easy to miss, but enough to allow someone to reinterpret ownership if no one challenged it quickly. I stared at him. You're telling me my husband's records were manipulated? I'm telling you, he said carefully, that someone had access to the system before everything was fully locked after his death. The words didn't fully land at first. Then they did. And when they did, I felt something shift inside me. Not just fear, something worse. Realization. Daniel wouldn't do this, I said immediately. Robert looked at me gently. I don't think Daniel is the one doing it. That sentence hit harder than anything else so far. I stood up slightly. Then who is controlling him? Robert hesitated again. That he said slowly is what we need to find out. I left his office with the folder in my hands and a heaviness in my chest I couldn't explain. The world outside felt normal. People walking, cars passing, life continuing as if nothing was collapsing underneath it. But my life was already splitting apart. When I got home, I noticed something immediately. The lock had been changed. My hand froze on the doorknob. I tried my key again. It didn't fit. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the door of my own house like it had become foreign territory. Then I saw the note taped to it. Mom, we need to talk. Don't involve lawyers. Daniel. My chest tightened instantly. I turned around sharply, and that's when I saw the second thing. A black car parked across the street. Same model as Victor's. Same still presence. Watching. I walked inside through the back door. I still had access to my mind racing. The house felt different again. Not just emotionally, physically. Like someone had been inside recently. Drawers slightly open. A chair moved. Subtle changes that only someone who lived here would notice. And then I heard it. Footsteps upstairs. My heart stopped. Slow. Controlled. Not Daniel. Daniel didn't move like that. I grabbed the kitchen knife without thinking and moved carefully up the stairs, every step louder than it should have been. Daniel! I called out. No answer. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a voice from the hallway. Not Daniel. Victor. Mrs. Sullivan, he said calmly. You shouldn't have gone to Robert Hayes. My blood turned cold. I stepped into the hallway. Victor Harlan was standing near Michael's old study door, as if he belonged there, as if he had always belonged there. How did you get into my house? I demanded. He tilted his head slightly. The same way I got into your records. My grip tightened around the knife. Where is my son? I asked sharply. Victor smiled faintly. Daniel is safe, he said. For now. For now, I repeated. He took a slow step closer. You misunderstand the situation, Angela, he said. This isn't about taking your house. My pulse pounded. Then what is it about Victor's eyes stayed locked on mine? It's about what your husband hid underneath it. And for the first time, I realized the basement was not just a place. It was the reason everything was happening. Victor Harlan stood in my hallway like he had every right to be there, not rushing, not hiding, not even pretending anymore. That was what frightened me the most. Men who break into your life usually try to disguise their intentions. They act polite. They smile too much. They explain themselves. Victor didn't. He looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand the rules of a game already in motion. You need to leave my house, I said firmly, tightening my grip on the kitchen knife. Victor glanced at it briefly, almost amused. If I were here to harm you, Angela, he said calmly, that knife would already be irrelevant. My hands trembled, but I didn't move. Where is Daniel? I repeated. He sighed softly as if I was asking the wrong question again. Your son is not in danger, he said. He's just finally seeing what you refuse to acknowledge. What I refuse to acknowledge? My voice rose. You're manipulating him. You're rewriting legal records. You broke into my home. Victor slowly took another step closer, and I noticed something strange. He wasn't looking at me with anger or fear. He looked patient, like he had done this many times before. Angela, he said quietly, this house is not just property. It never was. My stomach tightened. Stop talking in riddles, I snapped. Victor tilted his head slightly. Then let's stop pretending. He turned slightly and nodded toward the hallway leading to the basement door. The locked door Michael had always forbidden me to touch. My pulse spiked instantly. What about the basement? I asked sharply. Victor's expression shifted for the first time just slightly, a flicker of satisfaction. There it is, he said. What? That question, he replied. That's the reason everything is happening. My throat tightened. Get out of my house. He ignored me. Instead, he walked slowly toward the basement door. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stop him, but I didn't move, because something worse than fear was growing inside me now. Curiosity. Victor stopped right in front of the door and placed his hand lightly on the wood. Michael Sullivan was not just your husband, he said. He was part of something far larger than you were ever told. That's enough, I said sharply, but my voice didn't sound strong anymore. It sounded uncertain. Victor continued anyway. He didn't just own this house, he said. He protected what was under it. My mind flashed instantly to every warning Michael ever gave me. Don't go down there. Some doors should stay closed. At the time, I thought it was just his way of being overly cautious. Now I wasn't so sure. Victor turned back to me, and when he died, he said softly, the protection weakened. My heart beat faster. What protection I demanded? Victor smiled faintly again. You really don't know, he said. Do you? Before I could respond, a loud sound came from outside, a car door slamming, then another. Victor's eyes shifted toward the window, and for the first time I saw something like urgency. Daniel, I whispered. Victor nodded once. He shouldn't be here yet. That sentence made my stomach drop. Why, I asked. Victor didn't answer. Instead, he moved quickly, too quickly, and grabbed my wrist. Wait! I shouted. But he wasn't hurting me. He was pulling me toward the basement door. "Let go of me!" I struggled, but his grip was firm, and suddenly I heard footsteps at the front door, fast, heavy. Mom Daniel's voice echoed through the house. "Mom, where are you?" Victor leaned closer to me. His voice dropped. "Now you have a choice," he said. "You can keep living in ignorance, or you can finally understand why your husband lied to you for decades." The front door burst open. "Mom!" Daniel shouted again, closer now. Victor released my wrist instantly and stepped back. Too calmly, too deliberately, like he wanted Daniel to see only part of the scene. Daniel appeared in the hallway seconds later. He froze. His eyes went from me to Victor to the basement door. "What are you doing here?" Daniel asked sharply, his voice tense. Victor raised both hands slightly in a calm gesture. "Daniel," he said smoothly, "I was just explaining things to your mother." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You said you wouldn't come here without me." Victor sighed. "Your mother went to Robert Hayes." Silence. That name changed something in Daniel's expression immediately. His face tightened not in anger at me, but in fear. That was new. I noticed it instantly, Mom, Daniel said slowly. "Why did you go there?" "I had to," I replied. "Someone changed the records. Victor is not—" "Stop," Daniel interrupted sharply. I froze. He had never spoken to me like that. Not like this. Not with command. He looked shaken now, conflicted, like something inside him was cracking. Victor watched him carefully. "Daniel," Victor said softly, "this is exactly why we needed control of the situation." "Control," Daniel repeated bitterly. "You said she wouldn't get involved." "She didn't listen," Victor replied. Daniel ran a hand over his face, breathing heavily. Then he looked at me, and for a second I saw my son again. Not the controlled version, not the distant one, but the boy who used to ask me if monsters were real when he was 5. "Mom," he said quietly, "you shouldn't have touched the records." My heart clenched. "Daniel," I said gently, "what is going on? Why are you letting him do this?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the basement door, and that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about what was underneath it. Victor stepped back slightly. "Daniel, he said we don't have much time before others notice the breach." "Others," I repeated. Daniel flinched at that word. Victor ignored me. "Open it," Victor said. Daniel hesitated. I stepped forward quickly. "Daniel, don't listen to him." For a second, Daniel looked at me. Really looked at me. And what I saw there broke something inside me. Fear. Not of me, but of what would happen if he didn't obey Victor. "I'm sorry," Mom, Daniel whispered. Then he turned toward the basement door and reached for the handle. "Daniel, stop." My voice came out softer than I intended, almost broken. But he didn't stop. His hand hovered just inches from the basement door handle, trembling slightly. Not with hesitation exactly, but with pressure. Like someone was standing behind him in his mind, pushing him forward. Victor Harlan stood a few feet away, perfectly still, watching everything like a man observing a clock ticking toward a moment he had already planned. "Daniel," I said again, louder this time. "Look at me!" He flinched, but didn't turn. That was when I realized something terrifying. My son wasn't ignoring me. He was resisting me. There was a difference. Victor spoke calmly from behind him. "Open it, Daniel." The command was quiet, but it landed like weight. Daniel's fingers tightened around the handle. "No," I said sharply, stepping forward. "You don't have the right to." Victor cut me off without even looking at me. "Angela," he said smoothly, "this stopped being about rights a long time ago." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Daniel finally turned his head slightly. "Mom," his voice cracked. "Just don't make this harder. Harder for who I asked. Daniel, you're my son. You're standing in my house with a man I don't even know. And you're asking me to step aside while you open a door your father warned us never to touch." At the mention of Michael, something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Pain. Real pain. But Victor immediately stepped in. "Your father also signed the agreement," Victor said calmly. "That's a lie," I snapped. Daniel winced. That reaction hurt more than anything Victor could have said. Because Daniel didn't defend me. He didn't defend his father either. He just looked trapped between both worlds. Victor stepped closer to him. "Daniel," he said softly, almost gently, "you've already seen the documents. You know what happens if this remains unresolved." My stomach tightened. "Unresolved," I repeated. "What are you talking about?" Victor finally looked at me, and his eyes were colder now. "Your husband left behind more than property, Angela," he said. "He left behind exposure. Exposure to what I demanded." But Daniel suddenly spoke. "Mom, please." His voice was quieter now, broken in a way I had never heard before. "Just let me do this." Something inside me cracked. This wasn't my son making a choice. This was my son being forced into one. Victor nodded slightly. "That's enough," he said. Daniel exhaled shakily and turned the handle. The basement door clicked open. A cold draft rose instantly from below, sweeping through the hallway like a breath from somewhere buried. And for a moment no one moved. Daniel stared down into the darkness. I couldn't see anything from where I stood. Only blackness. Only silence. Then, a sound. Metal shifting. Not loud, but deliberate. Like something inside had been waiting to be heard. Daniel froze instantly. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Victor stepped forward slightly. "I told you," he said quietly. "It's still active." My blood turned cold. "Still active," I repeated. "What is still active?" Victor didn't answer me. Instead, he looked down into the basement with something like recognition, like returning to a place he had visited before. Daniel Victor said, "Go down." "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." Daniel turned toward me, and for the first time since this began, his expression wasn't cold. It was desperate. "I have to," he whispered. "Why?" I asked, stepping forward. "Why do you have to?" He swallowed hard. "Because if I don't..." He paused. He said, "Everything will collapse." My heart stopped. I repeated. Victor answered calmly. "Your husband knew this day would come." The world tilted slightly in my mind. "No," I said firmly. "Michael is dead. He's been gone for years." "Don't you dare use him!" "Mom," Daniel interrupted, suddenly sharper now, "please stop talking." I froze. Not because of fear, but because of the way he said it. Not angry, not cruel, just exhausted. Like I was interfering with something he had already lost the power to change. Victor gestured toward the stairs leading down. "Daniel," he said again now. Daniel stepped forward. One step, then another. I moved instantly. I grabbed his arm. "Daniel, don't," I said firmly. "Look at me. Whatever he told you, it's not real. This is manipulation." Daniel looked at my hand on his arm, then at my face, and for a second I saw him struggle again. But Victor's voice cut through everything. "If you hesitate," Victor said softly, "she will be the one who suffers the consequences." Daniel stiffened. "What consequences?" I demanded. Victor didn't answer me. He only looked at Daniel. That silence was the answer. Daniel pulled his arm gently away from me. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." Then he stepped into the basement. The darkness swallowed him immediately. I moved forward instinctively, but Victor raised a hand. "Stay here," he said calmly. He said, "Like hell I will," I snapped. But then something happened that made me stop. From the basement, a second sound. Not metal this time. A low mechanical hum. Faint at first, then growing stronger. Victor exhaled slowly. "Too late," he murmured. My heart raced. "What did you do?" I demanded. Victor finally looked at me fully, and for the first time his calmness slipped slightly. Not fear, but urgency. "I didn't do this," he said. "Your husband did." A cold silence filled the hallway. Downstairs, Daniel's voice echoed faintly. "Mom," he called out. And something in his voice made my entire body freeze. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. Like he had seen something he was never supposed to see. Then another sound came from below. A lock. Engaging. Followed by Daniel's voice again, louder now. "Mom, I can't get..." Then silence. I rushed forward instantly. "Daniel!" I shouted. "Daniel. Answer me?" I tried to go down the stairs, but Victor grabbed my shoulder. "Don't," he said sharply. "Get your hands off me!" I yelled, struggling. But his grip was firm. Too firm. "Listen to me," he said urgently now. "If you go down there now, you won't be able to come back up." My breath caught. "What does that mean?" I demanded. Victor hesitated. For the first time, he actually hesitated. And that scared me more than anything else, because men like him don't hesitate unless the truth is worse than the lie. "Angela," he said quietly, "your basement isn't a storage room." He paused. "It's a containment system." My blood went cold. "A what?" Before he could answer, a loud metallic clang echoed from below, followed by Daniel's voice again. But this time, it wasn't calling for me. It was screaming. Daniel's scream didn't sound like fear at first. It sounded like shock. Like he had walked into a room he was never supposed to enter and found reality waiting on the other side. "Daniel!" I shouted again, struggling against Victor's grip. "Let me go!" But Victor didn't move. His hand was still firm on my shoulder. Not violent, but immovable, like he had decided I was not allowed to take another step. "Listen to me," he said urgently now, his calm finally breaking. "If you go down there, you will change everything. Not just for him. For you." "I don't care," I snapped. "That's my son." Another sound came from the basement. Metal scraping. Then silence again. That silence was worse, because silence meant something had stopped, or something had begun. I twisted hard and finally broke free from Victor's grip. "Enough," I shouted. I rushed to the basement stairs. Victor followed immediately behind me, his voice sharper now. "Angela, stop! You don't understand what's down there." I turned back at the top of the stairs. "Then explain it." For the first time since he walked into my life, Victor looked unsettled, not scared. Controlled men like him don't get scared easily, but something in him had shifted. "This is not a normal basement," he said quickly. "It never was." "I don't care what it is," I yelled. "My son is down there." Another voice echoed up from below. Daniel again, but weaker now. "Mom, don't." Then a sudden interruption, a mechanical sound, like a heavy lock engaging. Click. Then another. Click. Victor swore under his breath. "That shouldn't be active," he muttered. My chest tightened. "What shouldn't be active?" I demanded again. Victor hesitated only a second. Then he said it. "The system." A cold wave ran through me. What system? But before he could answer, the basement lights flickered once, then came on. For the first time, I could see part of the stairwell. Concrete walls, old pipes, a faint glow from below, and Daniel's shadow at the bottom. I didn't wait anymore. I ran. "Angela!" "No!" Victor shouted behind me, but I was already moving down the stairs. Each step felt heavier, not physically, emotionally, like I was walking into something that had been buried on purpose. Halfway down I stopped, because I heard it clearly now. A hum. Low. Constant. Mechanical. And underneath it, voices. Not talking. Not arguing. Whispering. Daniel was at the bottom, frozen in place, his face pale, his eyes locked on something behind him. "Daniel," I called out. He turned slowly, and when I saw his face fully, my stomach dropped. He wasn't just scared, he was shaken to the core. "Mom," he whispered, "you need to see this." Victor appeared behind me on the stairs. He didn't come closer, he just stared downward, like he was counting seconds. I reached the bottom, and that's when I saw it. The basement was not a basement anymore, at least not like any I had ever known. It was larger than it should have been. Extended. Reinforced. Old walls replaced with steel panels in places. And in the center of the room, a sealed structure. Like a vault. No. Not a vault. A containment chamber. My breath caught. "What is this?" I whispered. Daniel stood beside it, trembling. I opened the inner door, he said quietly. It activated something. Victor stepped down the final steps slowly, his eyes fixed on the structure. "This is worse than I thought," he said under his breath. I turned to him sharply. "Stop speaking in riddles. Tell me what this is." Victor finally looked at me, and what I saw in his expression made my stomach drop again. Reluctance, like he was deciding how much truth I could survive. "This house," he said slowly, "was built on top of something your husband inherited, but never fully controlled." My hands went cold. "That's impossible," I said. "This is a residential property." Victor shook his head slightly. "It was modified decades ago," he said. "Long before you moved in." Daniel suddenly spoke, his voice cracking. "Mom, there are files in there." My heart stopped. "What files?" He pointed at a small panel beside the structure, a compartment that had opened after the system activated. Inside were sealed folders, stacks of them, labeled with codes instead of names. Victor took a step closer, then stopped, like he was afraid of crossing an invisible line. "This wasn't supposed to be accessed without authorization," he said quietly. "Whose authorization?" I asked. No one answered. Daniel reached for one of the folders with shaking hands. "Don't," Victor said sharply, but it was too late. Daniel pulled it out and opened it. For a moment he just stared. Then his breathing changed. Fast. Unsteady. "Mom," he whispered. "What is it?" I asked. He turned the folder slightly toward me. Inside were documents, legal records, financial transfers, and surveillance logs. My name appeared on one page, then Michael's, then Daniel's. My entire body went cold. This is surveillance," I whispered. Victor exhaled slowly. "It's documentation," he corrected. "That's the same thing I snapped." Daniel suddenly stepped back. "No," he said. "No, no, no." His hands were shaking harder now. "Daniel." "What did you see?" I asked, stepping toward him. But he didn't answer. Instead, he pointed at one specific page. I took the folder from him, and I read. At first, I didn't understand. Then I did, and my world tilted. Because it wasn't just records, it was monitoring data, behavioral logs, movement tracking, access patterns, and at the bottom of the page, a classification label. Containment subject, Angela Sullivan. My breath stopped completely. "No," I whispered. "No, this is wrong." Victor stepped closer now. His voice was quiet. "Angela, he said your husband didn't just own this property." He paused. "He was assigned to maintain you." Silence. My ears rang. "What did you just say?" I asked slowly. Daniel looked at me with horror, like he was realizing something he never wanted to understand. Victor continued. "The system wasn't built for storage," he said. "It was built for observation." My knees weakened slightly. "I don't believe this," I whispered. Victor nodded. "I didn't expect you to," he said. But Daniel saw enough to trigger the secondary lock. I turned to Daniel. "What did you do?" I asked. He shook his head rapidly. "I didn't mean to," he said. I thought it was a safe room." Victor's expression darkened. "There is no safe room," he said quietly. Then the structure behind them emitted a low mechanical tone, deeper than before, finalizing. Victor's eyes widened slightly. "No," he muttered. "It's fully awake now." And in that moment, the basement door above us sealed shut, with all of us inside. The sound of the basement door sealing shut was not loud. It was worse. It was final. A heavy mechanical thud echoed through the chamber above us, followed by a deep locking sequence that felt like metal teeth sliding into place. One after another, precise, controlled, unavoidable. Daniel spun around immediately. "No, no, no, no!" he shouted, rushing toward the stairs. "It locked!" He grabbed the handle, yanking hard. Nothing moved. "Open it!" he shouted again, pounding on the metal. "Open the door!" I stood frozen for a second, my heart pounding so violently I could barely hear anything else. Victor didn't move. He only looked at the ceiling, as if listening, as if counting. "Too late," he said quietly. That single phrase snapped something inside me. "What do you mean, too late?" I demanded. "Unlock it." Victor finally turned to me, and for the first time, his calm mask was gone completely. "There is no manual override once the containment sequence completes," he said. "Containment," Daniel repeated sharply. "What are you talking about?" "This is a basement." Victor shook his head slowly. "It was never just a basement," he said. And it was never just a house. The structure in the center of the room emitted another low hum, deeper this time, more alive. Daniel backed away from the stairs, breathing hard. "This is insane," he muttered. "This is insane. Mom, we need to break it open. There has to be a way out." He turned to the sealed chamber in the center of the room. "Maybe there's a secondary exit." "Stop," Victor said sharply. Daniel froze. Victor took a slow step forward. "Do not approach that structure again," he warned. Daniel snapped back at him. "Or what? We're already trapped." I finally found my voice. "Victor," I said, my hands shaking, "you are going to explain to me exactly what is happening. Right now." For a moment he didn't answer. Then he exhaled slowly like a man making a decision he had avoided for years. "This system," he said, "was designed during a private federal program decades ago. Your husband, Michael Sullivan, was one of the custodians." My chest tightened. "That's impossible," I said immediately. "Michael was a contractor, a normal engineer. He built bridges, for God's sake." Victor shook his head. "He told you that because that was the safe version of his life," Victor replied. Daniel looked between us, confusion turning into something darker. "Safe version," he repeated. "What does that even mean?" Victor ignored him and continued. "The structure beneath this house is a legacy containment unit. It monitors records and stabilizes certain behavioral anomalies." I felt my stomach drop. "Behavioral anomalies?" I repeated. Victor looked at me directly. "You," he said simply. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did. And when they did, I felt something cold spread through my chest. "That's ridiculous," I whispered. "I'm a retired teacher. I raised a family. You were observed," Victor interrupted. "That's all I'm saying." Daniel stepped forward suddenly. "Stop," he said loudly. "Stop talking like this is normal. You're saying my mother is part of some experiment." Victor turned to him. "I'm saying your mother is the subject of a long-term classification protocol," he said calmly. Daniel shook his head violently. "No," he said. "No, this is not real." But his voice didn't sound convinced anymore. It sounded desperate. The chamber in the center of the room emitted a sharp pulse. The lights flickered. For a split second, every screen-like panel embedded in the walls lit up simultaneously. Rows of data, names, dates, our house, our family. My breath caught, because I saw Michael's name, repeatedly, attached to authorization codes, system logs, and something labeled Observer Override, Active Michael Sullivan. I stepped back. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." Victor noticed my reaction. "You see it now," he said quietly. "He never told you the truth." Daniel suddenly shouted, "Mom, don't believe him. He's manipulating you." But even as he said it, his voice cracked. Because the evidence was all around us. The system responded again. A deeper mechanical tone filled the space. Victor's expression tightened instantly. "This is accelerating," he said under his breath. "What is accelerating?" I demanded. Victor turned sharply toward the chamber. "The system is entering full activation mode," he said, "which means it's reassessing all active subjects." Daniel looked terrified now. Reassessing what he asked. Victor hesitated, then said the words I didn't want to hear. "Survival classification." Silence. It was so heavy it felt physical. The air itself seemed to tighten around us. Daniel whispered, "That doesn't make sense." But Victor wasn't looking at him anymore. He was looking at me, and something in his expression changed. Concern. Real concern. "Angela," he said quietly, "you need to understand something very quickly." My heart pounded. what I asked. He stepped closer. You are not supposed to be in an active state right now. What does that mean? I demanded. Victor pointed at the chamber. It means something inside this system should have deactivated years ago when Michael died. My throat tightened. And it didn't, I whispered. Victor shook his head. No, he said. It adapted. A loud metallic sound echoed through the chamber. Daniel backed away instinctively. Mom, he said urgently, we need to get out of here. He ran back to the sealed stairs and slammed his fist into the door again. Nothing. No response. Victor walked closer to the center structure. Stop, I said sharply. Don't go near that. He ignored me. The structure emitted a low tone in response to his proximity. Like recognition. Victor paused. That's impossible, he muttered. What as I asked? But before he could answer, the chamber lit up completely. Bright white panels activated across every surface, and a voice filled the room. Not human, not robotic, something in between. Active subjects detected. Daniel froze. I felt my blood turn to ice. Victor closed his eyes briefly. No, he whispered. The voice continued. Classification update required. Then it said my name. Angela Sullivan. My knees weakened instantly. Daniel turned toward me in horror. Mom, he whispered. The voice paused, then added, Primary containment subject confirmed. The chamber emitted a final deep pulse, and the structure in the center slowly began to open. The moment the structure began to open, I felt my body go completely still. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something deeper, like my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. A low mechanical hiss filled the basement chamber as the central structure split along hidden seams. Panels shifted with precision, sliding apart like something that had been waiting a very long time to be activated again. Daniel stumbled backward. No, this is not happening, he whispered, shaking his head. This is not happening. Victor didn't move, but I saw it now clearly. For the first time, his composure wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. This wasn't supposed to trigger, Victor said under his breath. Not like this. The structure continued to open, and then I saw it. Inside was not storage, not machinery in the way I expected. It was a control chamber, screens, old but still active, dim lights flickering across surfaces embedded into the walls, and at the center, a chair. Not a normal chair. A monitored seat surrounded by metallic rings, cables, and scanning devices. My stomach dropped. Angela, Daniel said softly behind me. What is this? I couldn't answer. Because I didn't know. Victor finally stepped forward slowly now, like he was approaching something dangerous but familiar. This is impossible, he murmured. The system should have been dormant. Dormant? I repeated sharply. You keep saying system. What system? Victor didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on the chair. This was a behavioral stabilization program, he said quietly. A prototype designed to track long-term psychological adaptation within controlled environments. Daniel laughed once, sharp, broken. You're insane, he said. This is my mother's house, not a lab. Victor finally turned to him. It became both, he said. The words hit like a physical blow. I took a step forward, shaking. No, I said firmly. Michael built bridges. He worked in civil engineering. He was not part of anything like this. Victor's expression softened slightly. That was what he told you, he said. Something cold settled in my chest. You're lying. I said again, but my voice wasn't as strong anymore. Victor sighed.
I wish I was,
he said quietly. The chamber emitted another pulse. The screens around us flickered to life, and suddenly images appeared. Not random data, footage. My breath caught instantly, because I recognized the living room. This living room, but older, different furniture, different lighting. And there I was, younger, standing in the kitchen, talking, laughing, then suddenly pausing, looking directly toward the camera. My hands shook violently. "Turn it off," I whispered. "Turn it off right now!" But Victor didn't move. Daniel stepped closer, eyes wide.
"Mom,"
he said.
"That's you."
On the screen, I saw myself collapse at the table, holding my head like I was overwhelmed by something invisible. Then Michael appeared behind me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. The footage cut. Then another appeared. Me again. Different day. Sitting still for hours. Not moving. Not speaking. Just staring at the wall. Daniel stepped back. "This is surveillance," he said slowly. "This is watching her." Victor shook his head. "Not just watching," he said quietly. "Measuring." My knees weakened. "I don't understand," I whispered. Victor finally faced me fully. "Angela," he said, "your husband was assigned to monitor behavioral stability over long periods of emotional stress exposure." "That's not real," I said immediately. "That's not people don't do that to families." Victor's voice dropped lower. "They did," he said. "And Michael was one of the few who reported stability until something changed." The screen flickered again. A new file opened. Title: Spouse Influence Event. Daniel Sullivan. Subject reclassification initiated. Daniel froze instantly. "What is that?" he demanded. Victor closed his eyes briefly. "No," he whispered again. It started reactivating through him. I turned to Daniel, my heart pounding harder now. "Daniel," I said carefully, "what did you do in here?" He shook his head rapidly. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I just opened the door. I thought it was storage. I thought Dad left documents." "You triggered the secondary access point," Victor cut in sharply. Daniel's face drained. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear I didn't know." The system emitted another tone. Lower now. More focused. The voice returned. "Secondary subject detected." Daniel stepped back instantly.
No,
the voice continued. "Reclassification in progress." Victor moved suddenly. "Daniel, get away from the chamber." But it was too late. The rings around the chair inside the structure began to move, slowly rotating, activating. Daniel grabbed my arm. "Mom, we need to go now." But I couldn't move. Something about the system, about the footage, about my own life being displayed like data. It paralyzed me. Then the voice changed. "Primary subject interaction required." And suddenly, the lights in the chamber focused directly on me. Victor stepped between me and the structure instantly. "No," he said firmly. "She is not ready for interface." "Interface," I repeated weakly. Daniel pulled me backward. "Mom, please," he shouted. "We need to leave," but the basement door above us remained sealed. No escape. Victor turned toward the system. His voice was lower now, almost angry. "She was stabilized," he said. "You're not supposed to wake her profile." The chamber responded immediately. Stability compromised. The air felt heavier. The screens around us shifted again, now showing Michael, my husband, standing in the basement, speaking into a device. His voice echoed faintly from the speakers. "If this activates after my death," he said in the recording, "then Angela must not be reintroduced to full system awareness under any condition." I froze. Daniel looked at me.
"What does that mean?"
he whispered. Victor looked at me too, and for the first time, he looked sorry. It means he said quietly, "You were never supposed to remember this place." The chamber began to glow brighter, and the chair inside slowly turned toward me, like it was waiting. The chair moved, not physically like a person would move, but with a slow, deliberate rotation driven by hidden mechanisms inside the chamber. It turned until it was facing me directly, as if the entire room had been designed for this exact moment. My legs felt weak. I couldn't breathe properly, and yet I couldn't step back either. It felt like the basement itself had decided I was no longer allowed to leave.
"Mom,"
Daniel's voice was shaking behind me.
"please, we need to get out of here."
But I couldn't look away from the chair, from the structure, from the screen still showing Michael's recorded voice echoing through the room. "If this activates after my death." The sentence repeated in my mind like a curse. Victor stepped slightly to the side, his face tense now.
"This shouldn't be happening,"
he muttered again. The reactivation threshold was never supposed to reach this level. "Stop talking like I understand any of this," I shouted, finally breaking. "Explain it to me like I'm a human being, not a file." Victor looked at me, and something in his expression changed. Not cold, not controlled, something closer to exhaustion. This system, he said slowly, was designed to observe long-term emotional continuity under controlled environmental pressure. Your home was part of a field deployment. I shook my head.
"No,"
I whispered. "This is my life, not an experiment." Daniel grabbed my arm tighter. "Mom, please listen to him just this once," he begged. "Something is wrong here. Really wrong." Victor continued, ignoring the rising panic. "Michael Sullivan was assigned as an embedded observer," he said. "He was supposed to maintain stability in the subject environment you." My stomach dropped. "That's ridiculous," I said immediately. "Michael was my husband. He loved me." Victor nodded slightly. "Yes," he said. "That was part of his role." The words didn't fully land at first. Then they did, and when they did, I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Daniel's grip loosened slightly. "What? Are you saying?" he asked slowly. Victor hesitated, then added, "He was not only observing you, Angela. He was influencing outcomes." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. I shook my head again, harder this time. "No," I said. "No, that's not true. We built a life together. We raised Daniel. You were part of the outcome," Victor interrupted quietly. Daniel stepped back like he had been pushed. "Stop," he said sharply. "Stop saying that." But Victor wasn't finished. The system tracks adaptation. He continued. "Your emotional responses, your decisions, your long-term behavioral stability. Everything Michael did was documented as part of a controlled feedback loop." My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. "So what," I whispered, "you're telling me my marriage, my life, was monitored?" Victor looked at me directly. "Yes," he said. The chamber emitted a low tone again. The screens flickered, and suddenly a new file appeared. "Primary subject memory access authorized." Daniel froze. "What does that mean?" he asked. Victor's face tightened instantly.
No,
he said under his breath. That level of access should never trigger unless... The system interrupted him. Memory integration initiated. A sharp pulse of light filled the chamber. I screamed and stumbled backward as images flooded the screens faster than I could process. Not surveillance this time. Memories. My memories. But not the way I remembered them. They played differently. Shifted. Altered. I saw Michael sitting at the kitchen table late at night typing something on a device I had never seen before. I saw myself walking through the house in silence while he watched me from another room. I saw Daniel as a teenager arguing with Michael, but Michael wasn't arguing back. He was recording. Daniel grabbed his head.
Make it stop,
he shouted.
Turn it off.
Victor rushed forward.
I can't stop it once memory integration begins,
he snapped. My breathing became shallow.
No,
I whispered. This is not real. This is not my memory. But the system responded instantly. Memory consistency. 78% corroborated. My vision blurred. Daniel turned to me.
Mom, look at me,
he shouted.
This is not you.
This is something else. But I couldn't tell anymore. Because parts of it felt real. Too real. Victor stepped closer to the chamber.
If it's reaching memory alignment,
he said urgently,
then she's being reclassified as active cognition again.
Daniel turned on him.
What does that mean?
He demanded. Victor looked at him, and for the first time his voice dropped. It means the system thinks she's awake. Another pulse. Stronger. The chair inside the chamber lit up from beneath, and a mechanical arm extended slowly toward me. I stumbled back instantly.
Don't touch me,
I shouted. Daniel grabbed my hand.
We're leaving,
he said desperately, but the stairwell remained sealed. No movement. No response. Victor looked around, rapidly calculating.
This is locking down fully,
he muttered.
We're inside the activation cycle now.
Daniel's voice cracked.
So, we're trapped.
Victor didn't answer immediately. That silence was the answer. The system voice returned again.
Primary subject, Angela Sullivan.
I flinched. The voice continued.
Memory. Authentication required.
A new screen appeared. A single question: confirm original life structure. Daniel shook his head violently.
Don't answer it,
he shouted. But I couldn't stop staring, because something inside me felt like it was being pulled toward it, like answering was inevitable. Victor stepped forward urgently. If you confirm he said you fully reintegrate into the system profile. Daniel looked terrified. Mom, don't listen to him. But my eyes stayed on the screen, on the question. My life. Or something else. Victor suddenly said something that froze everything. If you confirm he said quietly, you may not remember us as we exist now. Silence. That was the first time I saw fear in Daniel's eyes. Not fear of the system. Fear of losing me. Mom, he whispered. My hand trembled as I lifted it toward the screen interface. Daniel stepped in front of me instantly.
No,
he said firmly.
No. You are my mother. You are Angela Sullivan. Not whatever this is trying to turn you into.
My hand stopped. For the first time, I looked at him properly, really looked, and I saw something that cut through everything else. Love, fear, desperation. Victor watched us both silently. The system pulsed again. Decision required. The chair extended slightly further, closer now, waiting. And in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just in the basement. It was inside me. My hand hovered in the air, just inches from the glowing interface. The chamber pulsed again as if impatient. Decision required. The system repeated colder this time, more insistent. Daniel stood in front of me like a barrier between me and something I didn't fully understand but instinctively feared. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "Please, don't let it do this to you." Victor was behind us now, pacing slightly, his usual control fractured. "This escalation is not standard," he muttered. "It's adapting too fast." Something triggered a deeper layer. I didn't take my eyes off the screen. The question was still there. Confirm original life structure. Whatever that meant. My breath felt shallow. "Daniel," I whispered. "What is he talking about? Why is this happening to me?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know it's not safe." Victor suddenly stepped forward again. "She is stabilizing into recognition state," he said sharply. "If she completes the prompt, we lose containment integrity." Daniel turned on him instantly. "Stop talking about her like she's a system object," he shouted. Victor didn't even blink. "That is exactly what she is classified as," he replied. The words hit the air like a slap. I stepped back instinctively. "No," I said firmly. "I am not an object. I am Angela Sullivan. I raised a son. I buried my husband. I lived in this house." But even as I said it, something inside me hesitated. Because the memories I had seen earlier, they didn't feel entirely stable anymore. Like they had edges I never noticed before. Victor noticed my hesitation immediately. "You're seeing the inconsistency now," he said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "Mom, don't listen to him," he insisted. "He's trying to break your sense of reality." Victor pointed toward the chamber. "The system is not creating lies," he said. "It is revealing layers of stored behavioral mapping." Daniel stepped forward aggressively. "Stop saying that." But the chamber responded before anything else could escalate. A new sound filled the basement. Not mechanical, almost emotional. A distorted voice layered under the system tone. "Subject memory instability detected." I clutched my head instinctively. The screens around us flickered again, and suddenly I saw Michael, standing in this basement. Not as a memory, but as a recording playing in real time. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. Serious. "Angela." His recorded voice said, "If you ever see this, it means the system has reactivated." My heart stopped. Daniel looked at the screen in shock. "That's Dad," he whispered. Victor exhaled sharply. "So it is fully online," he muttered. The recording continued. Michael's eyes looked directly into the camera. "You will be told many versions of the truth," he said, "but only one thing matters: do not allow full memory reintegration." I felt my stomach drop. "What does that mean?" I whispered. The recording flickered, then continued. "If Angela reaches full classification awareness, she will no longer distinguish between constructed memory and observed reality." Daniel stepped back slightly. "What he said. That doesn't make sense." But Victor looked pale now. "Michael knew this would happen," he said quietly. The chamber emitted a louder pulse. The system voice returned. "Memory. Reintegration. 62% complete." My vision blurred again. Fragments of images flashed across my mind. My wedding day. But the lighting was wrong. Daniel as a child, but his voice echoed strangely. Michael sitting alone in the basement writing something over and over again. I stumbled backward. "Stop it," I whispered. "Please stop it." Daniel grabbed my arms. "Mom, look at me," he said urgently. "You have to stay with me. You're here. This is real. I'm real." I looked at him, and for a moment, I couldn't tell. Victor suddenly stepped forward. "She is splitting," he said sharply. "We need to interrupt the cycle or she will fully integrate." Daniel turned to him furious. "Interrupt what cycle?" Victor hesitated, then said it. "The recall loop." Another pulse hit the room. The chair inside the chamber extended further, now close enough that I could see faint markings on its surface, my name engraved into metal plating. My breath caught. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." Daniel saw it too. His face went pale. Victor's voice dropped lower. "Angela," he said carefully, "you need to choose right now. Step away from the interface or complete the prompt." My hands were shaking uncontrollably. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why am I the subject of this?" Victor looked at me directly. "Because you were the most stable variable," he said. Daniel snapped. "That doesn't mean anything." Victor ignored him. "Your emotional patterns," he continued, "were consistent across all observed cycles. The system anchored around you." My knees weakened slightly. "All cycles," I repeated. Victor nodded once. "Yes," he said. "Multiple iterations of the same environmental structure." Daniel froze. "What does that mean?" he asked slowly. Victor hesitated, then answered. "It means your life here has been reconstructed more than once." Silence. That word hit harder than anything else. Reconstructed. I felt something inside me shift violently. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not true." But Victor didn't stop. Every time instability exceeded threshold, he said the environment was reset. Daniel's voice broke. "You're saying my entire life, my childhood, was repeated." Victor didn't answer directly, but he didn't deny it either. The chamber pulsed again. Final memory integration stage initiated. The lights intensified. Daniel grabbed my hand tightly. "Mom, please," he said, his voice desperate now. "Don't let them take you away from me." That sentence shattered something inside me, because beneath everything else, that was the only truth I could still feel without questioning. My son's hand. My son's voice. Real. I looked at him, and for the first time since this began, I made a choice that wasn't about the system. It was about him. I pulled my hand away from the interface. Daniel gasped slightly. Victor immediately stepped forward. "No," he said sharply. "Angela, you're destabilizing the containment response." But I wasn't listening anymore. I turned fully to Daniel, and I whispered, "I believe you." The chamber reacted instantly. A loud alarm-like tone filled the basement. Integration interrupted. The screens flickered violently. Victor swore under his breath. "She rejected it," he said. "We have a collapse window." Daniel still held my hand tightly. "Mom," he whispered, "we need to get out now." I nodded. For the first time, I wasn't confused. I was present. But as Daniel pulled me toward the stairs, the chamber spoke one last time. And this time the voice was different, softer, almost familiar. "Angela." I froze. The voice continued, "You will remember again." The lights cut out, and everything went black. The darkness didn't feel empty. It felt occupied, like the basement wasn't just without light, but actively holding its breath, waiting to see what we would do next. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened immediately. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm here," I said quickly, even though I couldn't see him. Victor's voice came from somewhere to our right. "Stay still," he said sharply. "Do not move until the system stabilizes." "Stabilizes," Daniel snapped. "You just turned off the lights in a sealed underground facility and you want us to wait." A low mechanical hum returned, faint at first, then slowly building again. Not random, directional, like the room was recalculating us. My heart pounded. "I don't like this," I whispered. "Something is still active." Victor didn't answer immediately. That silence was enough confirmation. Then soft emergency lighting flickered on. Dim red strips along the walls. The chamber was no longer fully visible, but enough light returned to reveal silhouettes. The central structure was still open, the chair still facing us. But now, the screens were different. Not showing memories, not showing data. They were blank, except for one word repeating across them: recalibrating. Daniel exhaled shakily. "Mom, we need to go. Now." I nodded, trying to focus, but my legs still felt unstable, like my body hadn't fully decided whether this was real or not. Victor moved closer to us again. "We have a short window before secondary lockdown engages," he said quickly. "If we leave now, we might bypass full reset." "Reset?" I repeated. Victor looked at me, and for the first time his voice softened. "Yes," he said. "Reset of the environment layer." Daniel turned sharply. "What does that even mean?" he demanded. Victor hesitated, then said, "It means everything you just experienced may not remain consistent outside this chamber." A cold wave went through me. "You're saying it might erase itself?" I asked. Victor shook his head. "Not erase," he corrected. "Reformat." Another low pulse vibrated through the floor. The chamber responded. "Secondary lock sequence preparing." Daniel grabbed my arm. "Mom, please let's go." We started toward the stairs, but halfway there the lights flickered again. And then a sound. Not mechanical. A voice. My voice. Coming from the chamber speakers. I froze instantly. Daniel did too. The recording played softly, distorted. "My name is Angela Sullivan." My breath stopped. It continued. "And I do not recognize this environment as my original life state." Daniel turned slowly toward me. "Mom," he whispered. Victor's face tightened. "No," he muttered. "That shouldn't be accessible." The recording continued. "If this message is playing, then I have failed to maintain continuity." My knees weakened. "That's not me," I whispered. "I've never said that." Victor stepped forward quickly. "That's pre-recorded compliance output," he said urgently. "Do not engage with it." But I couldn't look away. My voice kept speaking. And the subject known as Daniel Sullivan must not be exposed to full system truth without supervision. Daniel flinched. What he said sharply. "Me." The recording paused, then continued. "Memory distortion has reached acceptable intervention threshold." The chamber pulsed again, and suddenly a new set of lights turned on inside the structure, deeper within, revealing a smaller compartment behind the chair. Victor saw it and immediately froze. "No," he whispered. Daniel noticed. "What is that?" he asked. Victor didn't answer. Instead, he walked forward slowly, against his own warning. I followed instinctively. The compartment was opening. Inside it was a small console, old, mechanical, with a single lever and a biometric panel. Daniel stepped closer. "Is that a control?" he asked. Victor didn't respond. His eyes were locked on it. "This wasn't supposed to be exposed unless full reset was triggered," he said quietly. I looked between them. Reset of what I demanded. Victor finally turned to me, and what he said next made my stomach drop. "Your household environment." Silence. Daniel laughed once broken. "My house is not an environment," he said. "It's a home." Victor looked at him. "It was designated as a controlled adaptive residence field," he said. Daniel shook his head violently. No, that's insane." But I wasn't listening anymore, because I was staring at the lever, and something about it felt familiar, not logically, emotionally, like déjà vu I couldn't place. I stepped closer. Victor immediately reacted. "Don't touch that," he warned, but I already had my hand inches away. Daniel grabbed my wrist. "Mom, stop," he said urgently. "We don't know what it does." I looked at him, and something inside me tightened, because for the first time, I wasn't sure if stopping was the right thing. A loud mechanical tone echoed through the chamber. "Reset window open." Victor cursed under his breath. "They're forcing it," he said. "We don't have time." Daniel looked panicked now. "Who is they?" he demanded. Victor didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my shoulder. "Angela," he said firmly, "if that lever is pulled, everything you experienced here will collapse into a single stabilized memory stream. You may lose differentiation between what happened and what was constructed." I stared at him. "Constructed," I repeated softly. Daniel stepped in front of me again. "Mom, don't listen to him," he said quickly. "We leave. We go outside. We forget this place exists." But I couldn't move, because something inside my mind was already splitting. Fragments, conflicting emotions. Michael's voice. Daniel's voice. Victor's warnings. The chamber pulsed again. Final reset initiated. The lever vibrated slightly, like it was alive, like it was waiting for permission. I took a shaky breath. "Daniel," I said softly. He looked at me immediately. "Yes, Mom." My voice broke slightly. "If I choose wrong, what happens to you?" His expression softened instantly. "You're not going to lose me," he said. "No matter what this is." Something inside me shattered and strengthened at the same time. Victor stepped back slowly. "This is no longer about choice," he said quietly. "It's about survival integrity." The chamber hummed louder. The lever moved slightly on its own. Daniel saw it. "Mom! Now!" he shouted. And in that single moment, everything stopped mattering except one thing. My hand. On the lever. My hand touched the lever. It was cold. Too cold, like it had been waiting in that exact position for a very long time, untouched, unused, until me. The entire chamber seemed to react the moment my fingers made contact. A deep mechanical hum rolled through the basement, slower, now heavier, like something enormous had just acknowledged a final decision. "Mom, no!" Daniel shouted. He lunged toward me, grabbing my arm again. But Victor was faster. He stepped in, blocking Daniel with a sharp movement. "Don't interfere," Victor said urgently.
If she hesitates now, the system will force an automatic cascade reset.
Daniel froze. What does that even mean? He shouted. Victor didn't answer him. His eyes were locked on me. Not angry, not controlling anymore. Just tense, calculating, like he was watching a point of no return approach in real time. Angela, Victor said quietly, whatever you think this lever is, it is not a simple control. It decides the state of everything below this house. I swallowed hard. My hand trembled slightly on the metal. Then why does it feel like I've done this before? I whispered. That sentence made both Daniel and Victor freeze. Daniel turned to me instantly. What do you mean before? He asked. I couldn't answer, because I didn't know if it was a memory or something deeper. A feeling, a repetition. The chamber lights flickered again. The system voice returned, but it was no longer fully mechanical. It was layered, almost human. Finalization path confirmed. Daniel shook his head. This is insane, he whispered. This is not real. This can't be real. Victor stepped closer to me again, but carefully now, like approaching a volatile reaction. Angela, he said, lowering his voice. Listen to me very carefully. If you pull that lever, you may lock your perception permanently into one version of events. Everything else, including contradictory memory states, will be lost. I looked at him. Lost, I repeated. He nodded. Yes. Daniel grabbed my other arm now. Mom, please, he said desperately. We leave. We go upstairs. We call the police. We do anything but this. But I could feel it now. Something inside the system was pulling. Not physically, not mechanically, emotionally, like gravity made of memory. And then I heard it again. Michael's voice. Soft, from somewhere in the chamber. Angela. I froze. Daniel did too. Victor's face tightened instantly. That shouldn't be active, he muttered again. The voice continued. You always try to understand before you act. My breath caught. It sounded like him. Too much like him. Daniel stepped back slightly. That's Dad, he whispered. Victor shook his head sharply. It's a recorded behavioral echo, he said quickly. Do not respond. But I couldn't stop listening. The voice continued. If you are hearing this, then the system has reached critical divergence. My heart pounded. And you are standing at the decision point I warned you about. Daniel looked at me. Mom. What is this? He whispered. I didn't answer because the words felt like they were meant for me. Specifically, the voice continued. You will not be able to trust what you remember after this point. Victor suddenly stepped forward. That's enough, he said sharply. Cut the playback. But nothing stopped. The chamber responded instead. Core memory stream unlocked. The screens around us lit up again, but this time it wasn't fragmented footage. It was one continuous sequence. My life. But smoother, more structured, less chaotic. Daniel as a child laughing in the yard, Michael sitting beside me at dinner, me walking through the house in calm silence. Everything felt arranged, too perfect, too consistent. Daniel stepped closer to the screen. This is wrong, he said slowly. This isn't how I remember it. Victor nodded slightly. That's the point, he said quietly. I felt my hand tighten on the lever. Which one is real? I whispered. No one answered. The system voice returned. Stability index 41%. The lever vibrated again, like it was urging me forward. Daniel grabbed my wrist harder.
Mom, please don't do this, he said. Whatever they're showing you, it's not worth losing yourself over.
But Victor spoke at the same time.
If you don't pull it, he said, the system will continue to fragment your perception. You will no longer be able to distinguish between reconstructed memory and lived experience.
Daniel turned on him immediately.
So either way, she loses herself,
he shouted. Victor didn't deny it. That was the worst part. He just said quietly,
yes.
Silence dropped like a weight over the room. The chamber pulsed again. The lever shifted slightly under my hand. And then I saw something. Not on the screens, not in the system, in my mind. A memory. Michael standing in this basement, looking at me, saying something I had never fully remembered until now. Angela, if it ever activates without me here, you have to choose the version of reality that protects Daniel. My breath stopped. Daniel saw my face change. Mom, he whispered. I looked at him, really looked at him. And suddenly, I wasn't just thinking about myself anymore. I was thinking about him, about what this system was doing to his mind, to his identity, to his future. Victor noticed the shift immediately. He stepped forward.
Angela,
he said urgently, do not let sentiment override system awareness. Daniel snapped.
She's not a system.
But I barely heard him because everything inside me had narrowed to one decision. The chamber hummed louder. Final selection required. My fingers tightened. Daniel shook his head violently. Mom, I'm begging you, don't trust this. Victor spoke softer now. This is the only stable exit path. I felt my breath shake. And then I made the decision. Not because I understood everything, but because I couldn't carry the uncertainty anymore. I pulled the lever down. The entire basement went silent. For exactly 1 second. Then a sound like the world collapsing inward. A deep resonant pulse filled the chamber. The screens went white. Daniel screamed.
No!
Victor stepped back instantly. System cascade initiated, he muttered. The chair in the center of the structure retracted slowly. Lights dimmed. The chamber began to shake. And then everything stopped. Dead silence. Daniel was breathing heavily beside me. Mom, he whispered. What did you do? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure yet. The white screens flickered, and then one final message appeared. Memory state selected, primary continuity locked. Victor looked at it, and for the first time, he looked relieved, but also afraid. Daniel turned to me. Is it over? He asked quietly. I didn't know, but deep inside me, something had changed, and I couldn't tell anymore whether I had just saved us or locked us into something we would never escape. The silence after the lever dropped didn't feel like peace. It felt like suspension, like the basement itself was holding its breath, waiting to decide what kind of reality would exist next. Daniel stood beside me, frozen, his chest rising and falling too fast. Mom, he whispered again, but his voice was smaller now. What did you do? I didn't answer immediately, because I wasn't sure what I had done. The chamber lights were still dimmed, but no longer flickering violently. The screens that had flooded us with conflicting memories were now frozen on a single phrase: primary continuity locked. Victor exhaled slowly behind us. Not relief exactly, more like exhaustion. It stabilized, he said quietly. Daniel spun around instantly, stabilized what he demanded. We're still trapped underground in a...
Whatever this is.
Victor looked at him, and for the first time since this began, his voice was almost gentle. Not trapped, he said, contained. That word hit me again. Contained. I repeated it in my mind, like something had been placed inside boundaries I didn't fully understand. I slowly released my grip from the lever. My fingers felt numb. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Victor stepped closer to the central structure.
"That depends on what version of the system you just locked in," he said.
Daniel shook his head sharply.
"No,"
he said.
"No more versions. No more systems. I want real answers."
Victor looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slightly.
"Then listen carefully,"
he said. The chamber emitted a soft, steady hum, now no longer aggressive but present, like a machine settling into a long-term state. Victor continued.
"Your husband, Michael Sullivan, was not just a participant in this system. He was one of its stabilizers."
My chest tightened instantly. He was a bridge between observed reality and recorded continuity, Victor said.
When he died, that bridge collapsed.
Daniel looked confused.
"And that means what he asked."
Victor turned to the central chair.
"It means the system began compensating," he said. "It started reconstructing behavioral environments to maintain consistency."
I felt a cold wave move through me.
"Reconstructing," I repeated.
Victor nodded.
"Yes, your home, your routines, even interpersonal relationships were maintained through adaptive modeling."
Daniel laughed once, but there was no humor in it.
"So, you're telling me,"
he said slowly,
"our lives were being edited?"
Victor didn't deny it.
"That's one way to describe it,"
he said. A long silence followed. Then Daniel turned to me.
"Mom,"
he said softly,
"tell me you don't believe this."
I looked at him, and for the first time since this began, I hesitated, because something inside me had shifted after the lever, not memory, not knowledge. Perception, like the edges of my life, had become slightly adjustable. Victor noticed my expression.
"You feel it now,"
he said quietly. I looked at him sharply. "What do I feel?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Continuity awareness." Daniel stepped back slightly.
"No,"
he said immediately. "Stop talking to her like that." But Victor continued anyway. "Angela," he said gently, "your perception is no longer strictly linear. The system has locked you into a stabilized stream, but remnants of alternate reconstruction still exist in your cognition." I shook my head slowly. "That's not possible," I whispered. But even as I said it, I wasn't fully certain anymore. The chamber suddenly emitted a deeper tone. Not alarm, not activation, something closer to completion. A new message appeared on the screens. "External interference detected." Victor's expression changed instantly.
"No,"
he muttered.
"that shouldn't be possible after lock."
Daniel looked between us.
"What does that mean now?" he demanded.
Victor stepped forward quickly.
"It means someone outside is trying to access the system again."
My stomach dropped.
"Who?" I asked.
Victor didn't answer immediately, then said,
"Victor Harlan."
Daniel frowned.
"You are Victor Harlan,"
he said sharply. Victor shook his head.
"No," he said. "I am an authorized containment analyst assigned to monitor him."
The room went silent. Daniel looked stunned.
"So who have we been talking to this whole time?"
he whispered. Victor hesitated, then said something that made my blood run cold. "Someone who shouldn't have had direct access to you." The chamber flickered again. The screens briefly went black. Then a new interface appeared. A live signal. Incoming. Victor moved instantly.
"Cut it," he said sharply. "Block external handshake."
But it was too late. The system responded first. Connection established. A voice came through the chamber speakers. Not Michael. Not the system voice. A third voice. Calm. Controlled. Familiar in a way I didn't want to recognize. "Angela Sullivan," it said softly. My breath caught instantly. Daniel stiffened. Victor's jaw tightened. The voice continued. "I see you chose continuity stabilization." I stepped back slightly. "Who is that?" I whispered. The voice paused, then replied,
"You know exactly who I am."
Victor suddenly stepped in front of me.
"No,"
he said sharply.
"That connection is unauthorized."
Daniel looked between us. "What is going on?" he demanded. The voice ignored him. Instead, it spoke to me directly.
"You were never meant to leave the original framework," it said. "But Michael made an error."
My chest tightened. "Michael," I whispered. Victor snapped.
"Don't engage with it."
But I couldn't stop listening. The voice continued.
"And now you've locked yourself into a partial continuity state."
"Interesting choice." Daniel turned pale.
"What is it talking about?"
he asked. Victor's voice dropped.
"Angela,"
he said urgently,
"whatever you hear next is not reliable."
But the voice interrupted him.
"Victor Hayes,"
it said calmly. Victor froze. My eyes widened. Daniel looked confused.
"Wait, Hayes,"
he repeated.
"I thought his name was—"
Victor raised a hand sharply.
"Do not say anything else," he warned.
The voice continued.
"You were not assigned to disclosure," it said. "You were assigned to containment integrity."
Victor's breathing changed slightly. Faster. More controlled. Daniel noticed immediately.
"Mom,"
he said slowly.
"Who is he?"
Victor turned slightly toward us, and for the first time, I saw fear in him. Real fear. The voice finished softly. "And now, you've failed." The chamber lights flickered violently again. The system responded.
"Continuity breach active."
Victor grabbed my arm.
"We need to leave," he said quickly. "Now."
Daniel stepped back.
"Leave,"
he shouted.
"The door is still sealed."
Victor looked at the stairwell, then at the chamber, then at me, and said quietly,
"There is another exit."
My heart pounded. Where I asked. Victor hesitated, then looked directly at the central structure, through the system core. Daniel shook his head violently. "That's insane!" Victor grabbed a hidden panel beside the chamber. It slid open, revealing a narrow passage behind the structure. Dark, unstable, uncertain.
"We go now,"
Victor said firmly. The voice echoed again from the speakers.
"You cannot exit stabilized continuity without full reset," it said.
Victor ignored it. He pulled me forward. Daniel followed immediately. But as we stepped toward the passage, I looked back one last time. At the chair, at the chamber, at the life I thought I had always lived. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was leaving it behind or waking up from it. The passage behind the chamber was narrow. Too narrow. Concrete walls pressed in on both sides as we moved forward in a tight line, Victor leading Daniel right behind him and me at the back, still trying to process everything I had just been told, or shown, or forced to accept. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. The air was colder here. Not natural cold. Artificial. like the space itself was regulated. "Stay close," Victor said sharply. "Do not stop walking under any circumstance." Daniel turned slightly.
"Where does this go?"
he asked. Victor didn't look back. "Out," he said simply.
That answer should have reassured me.
It didn't, because nothing about this place felt like a normal exit. Every step we took deeper into the passage felt like moving away from something physical and closer to something psychological. My thoughts kept breaking apart. Michael's voice, the screens, the chair, the word continuity. It kept repeating in my mind like a loop that didn't belong to me. Daniel suddenly slowed. "Mom," he whispered.
"Are you okay?"
I blinked. "I think so," I said automatically. But I wasn't sure, because I felt something strange. Like my memories were no longer fixed in place. Like they shifted slightly every time I tried to hold on to them too tightly. Victor suddenly stopped. "Almost there," he said. Ahead of us, the passage opened into a small maintenance chamber. Metal stairs led upward, a heavy sealed hatch above. Victor placed his hand on a control panel beside it. For a second, nothing happened. Then the system voice echoed faintly through the walls behind us. "Continuity exit request detected." Daniel turned instantly.
"Is it following us?"
he asked. Victor didn't answer. Instead, he forced the panel again. The hatch above us unlocked with a loud mechanical release. A beam of natural light poured down. For the first time since entering the basement, I saw something that wasn't artificial. Daylight. Fresh air. The world outside. My chest tightened with something I couldn't fully name. Hope. Fear. Disbelief. Victor climbed the stairs first. "Go," he ordered. Daniel followed immediately, then me. Each step upward felt like crossing layers of reality I didn't fully trust anymore. When I finally reached the top and pushed the hatch open, warm air hit my face. Real air. Birds in the distance, a suburban backyard, sunlight. My knees almost gave out. We were outside, behind the house, but something was wrong, immediately wrong, because the house looked slightly different. The angle was familiar, but the details weren't. The paint was newer, the windows slightly repositioned, the backyard too clean, too perfect. Daniel noticed it too. "Mom," he said slowly. "This doesn't look right." Victor climbed out behind me and immediately froze. His expression changed completely. "No," he whispered. I turned to him. "What I asked." He looked around slowly. "This is not the correct external state," he said quietly. Daniel stepped forward. "What does that mean?" Victor pointed at the house. "This structure has been reconstructed." My stomach dropped. "Reconstructed?" I repeated. Victor nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "But not recently. This is an older baseline version." Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "We lived here. This is our house." Victor looked at him and said something I wasn't ready for. "Are you sure, Silence?" That question hit harder than anything else. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure. My memories of the house shifted slightly in my mind, like someone had gently adjusted the lighting. Daniel stepped forward angrily. "Stop doing that," he said. "Stop messing with her head." Victor raised his hand slightly. "I'm not altering anything," he said. "The system is stabilizing her perception into the exit layer." I felt dizzy. "Exit layer?" I whispered. Victor nodded. "Yes,"
he said. You are no longer fully inside the controlled environment, but you are not fully outside either. Daniel grabbed my arm. Mom, we're leaving, he said firmly. Right now. We walk away from this house. But I couldn't move because something was happening. The house was flickering. Not physically, perceptually. One moment it looked solid. The next moment it looked slightly different, like multiple versions of it were overlapping. I stumbled back. Daniel, I whispered. Do you see that? He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. Victor looked alarmed now. Your perception is destabilizing, he said urgently. We need to finalize exit synchronization. Before I could ask what that meant, a voice came again. Not from underground this time. Not from speakers. From everywhere. Angela Sullivan. I froze instantly. Daniel grabbed my hand. Mom, don't listen. But the voice continued. You have exited partial containment. Victor stepped forward sharply. Show yourself, he demanded. A pause. Then the voice responded. You already know where I am. My breathing stopped. Because suddenly, I did know. Not logically, but instinctively. The system wasn't in the basement anymore. It wasn't in the house. It was in the space between perception layers. Victor turned to me. His expression hardened. Angela, he said quietly, you need to make one final choice. Daniel looked at him immediately. What choice he demanded. Victor didn't look at him, only at me. Accept full continuity collapse, he said, or reject it and remain in a fragmented but stable perception state. My mind spun. Stable, I repeated. This is stable. Victor nodded. It is survivable. Daniel shook his head violently. No, he said. No more choices. We leave. We live normal lives. That's it. Victor looked at him. And for the first time, he softened. That version of normal no longer exists for her, he said quietly. Silence. The air felt heavier again, like the system was listening, waiting. Daniel stepped in front of me again. Mom, he said softly. Look at me. I did. And I saw what I always saw in him, even through everything. My son. Not a system subject, not a classification, just Daniel. Whatever this is, he said, you are still my mother, and I am still your son. That is real. Something inside me cracked open. Victor stepped back slightly. The emotional anchor is stabilizing her, he murmured. The voice returned again. Softer now. Closer. Angela. Final confirmation required. I looked at Daniel, then at Victor, then at the house flickering behind us, and I understood something I hadn't understood before. There was no perfect answer, only a choice about what pain I could carry. I stepped forward slightly and spoke. I choose my son. Silence. The world stopped for a moment. Then, the house behind us stopped flickering. The air steadied. The voice softened one last time. Continuity release accepted. Victor exhaled slowly. Daniel pulled me into his arms immediately. Mom, he whispered. I held him tightly. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was inside something artificial. I felt present, real, even if I didn't understand everything.
Victor stood a few steps away, watching us. And for the first time, he didn't look like someone in control. He looked like someone who had just witnessed something irreversible. Then he spoke quietly. "Some truths don't disappear," he said. "They just stop being contained." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving us standing in the sunlight, together, not fully understanding what we had survived, but still holding on to each other anyway. What I learned through everything that happened is something I will never forget. Sometimes truth is not something you discover all at once. Sometimes it comes in layers, some comforting, some painful, and some that completely reshape how you see your own life. I spent so long believing that my world was simple. A home, a family, a past I understood. But I realize now that what we believe to be certain can shift when we are forced to confront things beyond our understanding. But even in the most confusing moments, one truth remained unchanged: love. No system, no manipulation, no hidden structure can erase the bond between a mother and her child. Daniel was never just part of a mystery. He was my anchor when everything else was falling apart. And in choosing him, I didn't choose ignorance, I chose connection. I chose humanity over confusion. Maybe I will never fully understand what was beneath that house. Maybe I will never know how much of my past was real and how much was shaped by something else. But I have learned something more important. You don't need to understand everything to know what matters most. Sometimes survival is not about answers. It's about holding on to the people you love when everything else feels uncertain. If this story made you reflect on trust, family, or truth, please leave a comment below. What would you have chosen in my place? And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now in your world. Because sometimes sharing our stories is how we remind ourselves that we are still real.